Good morning, Maria. Good to be with you.
Your reaction to David Weiss being named as special counsel here?
Well, this appointment is camouflage and it's cover-up. I think it's disgraceful. Listen, David Weiss was the U.S. attorney handpicked to lead this investigation, who spent the last 5 years covering it up. David Weiss, who was personally selected by the two Democrat senators from Delaware, Tom Carper and Chris Coons. For 5 years, the investigation has gone nowhere other than to protect Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Not only that, David Weiss is the one that is subject to two whistleblower complaints from senior career IRS officials who came forward. They said they'd never seen an investigation like this in their entire time in law enforcement. They said that the Department of Justice, lawyers working for David Weiss, protected the Biden family, that they gave heads up to Hunter Biden before search warrants were executed, presumably so that he could hide incriminating evidence, that they refused to allow them to ask any questions at all about the big guy, about Joe Biden, that they were focused on, you cannot inquire into President Joe Biden's personal corruption. And the result of all of that is that David Weiss either was an active participant in covering up this criminality and protecting Joe Biden, in engaging in obstruction of justice. That's option one. Or option two, he wasn't the driver. He was just complicit. He was so weak that he couldn't stop the partisans in Main Justice from turning it into a political effort to protect Joe Biden. Either case, he is a wildly inappropriate person to be a special counsel. We should have a special counsel, but number one, we should have a special counsel to investigate Merrick Garland for whether he lied under oath to Congress in response to questioning from me, number one, and whether he committed obstruction of justice. Those are both the allegations that came from the whistleblowers. And number two, we need a whistleblower not to go back and bury what Hunter Biden did, which is what David Weiss has been doing for 5 years. We need a special counsel to investigate Joe Biden and the $20 million that his family received while he was vice president. The allegation now is for official favors that he was selling. That is bribery. It's not a little gun charge on Hunter. It is bribery of the president of the United States is what these allegations are. And this special counsel, he ain't going to do anything to get to the bottom of that.
Well, James Comer put out a statement. He writes this move by AG Garland is part of the Justice Department's efforts to attempt a Biden family cover-up in light of the GOP oversight's mounting evidence of President Biden's role in his family's scheme selling the brand for millions of dollars to foreign nationals. I want to go through some of these latest allegations and these new bank records with you, Senator, because you are a constitutional expert. So it begs the question, what is Congress going to do about this? Okay, who has the upper hand from your standpoint in terms of the Constitution? Is it the special counsel, David Weiss, who may very well be able to freeze all information flow to Congress? Or is it the congressional lawmakers and the congressional investigators who have unearthed all of this evidence?
Well, look, it's both. And under a constitutional system, we have checks and balances. We expect the executive and the legislature to wrestle with each other. But the executive has an advantage in that it is only the executive, is only the Department of Justice that can convene a grand jury. It is only the executive that can bring an indictment. It is only the executive that can prosecute, which means as long as the Biden Department of Justice remains a partisan political apparatus, they will not prosecute Joe Biden. They will not prosecute Hunter Biden for serious offenses. They will not prosecute Merrick Garland for serious offenses. And Congress doesn't have the ability to do that. Now, Congress has its own authority, and I believe the only progress we're going to see over the next year and a half on this corruption is going to come from Congress. It's going to come from the House of Representatives, James Comer and Jim Jordan, both of whom are doing a phenomenal job. They have subpoena power. They're using it. They'll continue to use it. But Maria, pause and look at what the House has uncovered already.
Yeah.
James Comer has released bank records that show that the Biden family and their associates received over $20 million from Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan while Joe Biden was vice president. That's one point that is really important not to miss. This isn't over their entire career. This is while Daddy was VP, $20 million. Any reporter who gives a flip about doing his or her job ought to be asking the president at every stage, what did your family do to earn $20 million while you were vice president during those 8 years? Number two, lots of Democrats in defending Biden, they keep using reference to influence peddling or access. That's not what these allegations are. Influence peddling and access happens a lot in Washington. There are a gazillion Washington lobbyists on K Street. That's not what the allegations are here. The allegations are that Hunter was selling official favors from Daddy when he was vice president of the United States. If you look at the FD 1023, the allegation there is the oligarch who owned Burisma spent $10 million, $5 million to Joe Biden, $5 million to Hunter Biden, in exchange for getting Joe Biden to fire the prosecutor who was prosecuting that corrupt oligarch. We know the second half of the quid pro quo happened. Joe Biden has admitted he got that prosecutor fired. The allegation is he was bribed to do it. And number three, it's important to understand, this is often discussed as Hunter's business dealings. This was not Hunter's business dealings. This was Joe Biden's business. Hunter has no marketable skills. No one on planet Earth would pay him $20 million to do anything. What Hunter was selling was Daddy. This was Joe Biden's business, shaking down, mind you, not shaking down our friends, not shaking down France or England or Italy, but shaking down corrupt oligarchs in communist China to the tune of over $20 million. Hunter was the salesman, but the product was Joe Biden's personal favors, and that is, if true, corruption at the very highest level of government.
Well, what does this mean in terms of an impeachment inquiry? Do you think this special counsel and this power play out of the DOJ warrants that impeachment inquiry sooner rather than later? Do you support an impeachment inquiry?
Absolutely, yes. I have publicly called for 3 impeachment inquiries to proceed in the House. Number one, I believe the House should impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, for opening up our borders and creating the greatest humanitarian disaster in our history. Number two, I believe the House should impeach Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, for being brazenly lawless, for committing perjury and obstruction of justice. And number three, I believe the House should open an inquiry into impeaching Joe Biden. Now, to impeach Joe Biden, what needs to be demonstrated is bribery. Under the text of the Constitution, a president can be impeached for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Bribery is explicitly enumerated. Now, what does it take to have bribery? The essence of bribery is a quid pro quo. Now, you'll remember during the first Trump impeachment, we heard that over and over and over again, quid pro quo. That is a Latin phrase that means this for that. It means compensation, usually money, in exchange for an official favor of a government office holder. Now, with respect to this quid pro quo, we know the quo happened. Joe Biden, on television in an interview, bragged that he held hostage over $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees to Ukraine and forced them to fire the prosecutor that was investigating the oligarch that was paying his son $1 million a year and allegedly had paid him and his son $10 million altogether. And Joe Biden says, son of a bitch, the prosecutor got fired. He's admitted the quo. The only question for bribery is the quid. Did that oligarch pay Joe and Hunter $10 million, $5 million to Joe, $5 million to Hunter? If yes, that's bribery, and Biden should be impeached. He should be removed from office. He should be prosecuted, and he should go to jail.
But, Senator, then what is going on in the Senate with your Republican colleagues? Here's what Mitch McConnell said this week. I said 2 years ago when we had not one but 2 impeachments that once we go down this path, it incentivizes the other side to do the same thing. Impeachment ought to be rare. This is not good for the country. Does McConnell not understand the bribery charges? Does he not see these bank records that we have right here? Let's put those bank records up on screen because we have the bank records that House Oversight Committee lawmakers have released, indicating the $5 million to Hunter, the $5 million to Joe. All of these 20 shell companies where foreigners were sending millions, and then eventually the money made its way into Biden family bank accounts. So what does Mitch McConnell say? Have you spoken to your colleague, Mitch McConnell?
Look, I have no idea what Mitch knows or doesn't know. I will tell you there are very few people in the Senate that are following closely the details of what's happening here. Part of the reason is Senate Democrats want to have nothing to do with it, so we won't have a single hearing for the next 2 years in the Senate Judiciary Committee on any of this because the Democrats do not care. Not a single Democrat cares whether the President of the United States has received millions of dollars of bribes from foreign nationals. It doesn't matter because they put partisan politics above the rule of law. I will say, look, when the Democrats abused the impeachment power by impeaching Trump twice because they hated him. The impeachments were bogus. They were not well-grounded factually or legally. I said at the time they were setting into motion a process where impeachment becomes a weapon each side uses against the other. And I think that's a bad dynamic.
All right.
This is qualitatively different. This is qualitatively different because the allegations here are of bribery. Bribery is specifically enumerated in the Constitution of the United States, and the scope of it, $20 million while he was vice president. By the way, another $8 million just a few months after he finished being vice president from communist China. We have the WhatsApp text that Hunter allegedly said to a senior Chinese communist official saying, I'm sitting right here next to my father, and if you don't pay me now, my father is going to punish you. Now, one of the things the IRS whistleblower said is they wanted to use GPS data to determine, well, was Joe Biden sitting next to Hunter? Is this text accurate? If Joe was next to him, that shows that Joe is part of the threat trying to extort cash from the Chinese. And according to the IRS whistleblowers, DOJ said, no, you cannot determine whether Joe was actually sitting next to Hunter Biden when Hunter said, my dad's next to me. And we know the threat worked because within weeks, over $8 million was transferred from the Chinese communist to the Biden family.
Senator, we know all this. I'm just trying to understand why Mitch McConnell is uninformed on the subject.
That one you'd have to ask Mitch.